guys, it's Crystal from Pure, and I just wanted to show you a quick tip that I don't know if many people know that they have access to inside of CC 2015. With my personal work, I tend to shoot JPEG. I used to shoot JPEG and RAW, and now I've gone more towards JPEG. And with my client work, I tend to shoot RAW. However, there are times that I forget to choose RAW after I've shot JPEG, and more as I get more experience with photography, I love the file sizes of JPEG more than the file sizes of RAW. And so, but sometimes, even when I custom white balance and I properly expose my photos, sometimes the sun will go behind the clouds and the exposure will change, and the first couple shots that I take after that happens are underexposed or need to be fixed, or sometimes the white balance still needs a little bit of tweaking even though I shot in Kelvin, or whatever the reason is. Sometimes I miss having the access to the camera raw that I had when I shot raw, but I'm going to show you that you can't access that. So first, let me try to just brighten this using the different options. You have curves, levels, and brightening and contrast as some of the options to brighten your photo. And so I'll choose curves, and I'll just go ahead and brighten this. And I may add a little bit of a pop right about here. Okay, so I'll come over here to my history tab and take a screenshot, and I'll name this curves, just so I know what we did. So I'll come back to the beginning, and then I'll use my levels, and I'll brighten this. And see what it did? Like it. Oh, I don't like the way that looks. So I'll add a pop to that, and come over here, history, and name this levels. Okay, I'll come back to the original, and I'll use brightening and contrast. And this is going to keep some of the contrast, so I think I won't do the contrast, I'll just do the brightening. Okay, and I'll name this brighten. Another option, I'll come back here, is to Command J to duplicate the layer and come over here and click screen. And I could lower the opacity of this to right about here. So that's another option to brighten your photo. So those are the different type of options you have. But I'm going to come back to my original and show you something that I love having access to. Command J to duplicate the layer and come up to filter and choose camera raw filter. Don't choose the one that's up here. If there is camera raw here, that means you already know that camera raw exists here and you just used it. This will show whatever the last filter it is that you used. So if you use a blur, if you click that, it'll reapply the same settings to this photo. So I'm just going to come down here to camera raw filter, and it will open up into camera raw. Excuse me. And now you have access to everything that you would have access to if you shot this in RAW. And you'll notice here the file name, it is a JPEG. So I can raise my exposure, and I do have my clipping warnings on. You can turn those on with turn those on just by clicking on these little buttons here. And so if I go too bright, it turns red. If I go too dark, it turns blue. That just means that there's no detail wherever that is. And so I think right about here is good. There's a little bit of red here, but I'll show you how I fix that. So I'll go ahead and do black for a little bit of pop. And if I turn those blues off, you can see just where those blues are, it's completely black. There's no detail in those spots, but where it is, I don't mind. And so I'll go ahead, I like that, I'll go ahead and hit OK. And now I'll take a snapshot of this and name this ACR, which is Adobe Camera Raw. And so this was the original, and this was Camera Raw. This was screen, this was brighten, this was levels, and this was curves. And curves doesn't look bad, it's just really contrasty. If you look at her cheeks and her forehead here, she's got a few hot spots. ACR, she has those hot spots, but they're not as pronounced. There's still some red tone to those hot spots. If you look at curves again, there's more white, and just it's more contrasty. And even if I click this curves and get rid of the pop that I added, it's still like the coloring of the photo is different than the ACR. And just look at her cheeks. I'm not a big fan. That's why I love having access to the ACR. Now, there are a few hot spots on her. So what I will do is Shift Command E to merge those, Command J to duplicate. And then I'll come up again, Camera Raw Filter. And I use the shortcut keys, but until you learn those, you can just access it through these menus. And now the nice thing is I've got, it all zeroes out again. So I've got access again. With this, you've got access to a full 5 stops. Okay, and so if you say you really underexpose and you raise it up like 2.5 stops, and then you merge the layers and then open it again, you've got access to another 5 stops for exposure. So what I want to do is fix these highlights, and actually I'm going to do a quick edit. So I'll come down here and I'll go shadows, and I'll go blacks, and then I'll go highlights, and I'll bring down the whites a little bit. I might raise the exposure just a smidge. And maybe bring down the highlights just a little bit more. And so this is what we started with here, and this is what we have right now. And now let me go through all these. Let me cycle through these before and afters. Perfect. Okay, so now the other thing that you have access to is the hue, saturation, and luminance sliders. And I love these. I come to my saturation, and I almost always will desaturate the skin just a little bit so it's not as contrasty and not have too much color cast. And then I'll come over to the luminance and raise it just brightens those skin tones a little bit. And then you can change the hue. If you wanted to change the hue of the greens, you could. I mean, really whatever you want to do. So I can make it really yellow. I can make it more green. I'll just go ahead and change that to 0. The other thing that I like doing is using the radial filter. And so you just click this little circle here and click this and just drag it to where you want. And you'll notice it's applying it to the outside. So we're underexposing what's outside of this circle. If I click inside, it will underexpose what's inside that circle. But I want it to underexpose what's outside that circle. And I will lower the clarity some too. And so it's just lowering the clarity, what's around there. And as I get closer, it gets smaller. And you can also rotate it this way, however you want. And I think that is perfect. So I'll go ahead and hit OK. And this was right after we just fixed the exposure, and now this is what we have here. And so this is what we started with, and this is what we ended with, just with the Camera Raw filter. And I just love how this looks. I mean, I would give that to a client in a heartbeat. And now let's come over to this image really fast. My computer. Okay, so here we have this image. It's a little, actually, I don't think it's underexposed. It just needs some white balance tweaking and maybe a pinch of exposure. So again, I could do this with Photoshop. I could raise the exposure and then try to fix the white balance by going into the red tone and raising that and coming into the blue curve and lowering that a little bit. But it's so hard you have to really be careful with the sliders and how, and how far you move those. So I'll name this curves. So come back here, Command J, filter, Camera Raw. And now I can use the white balance dropper tool, and I can just click anywhere on their dresses. And look at that. It's so much better. There's a million places you could click in this photo. I feel like maybe right there's a good start. And I feel like maybe just raise the exposure a little bit and then pull the blacks down a little bit. And now the nice thing is I can target their dresses here. So I can come over to the hue saturation, and she's got some blues in her dress there. So I can desaturate the blues. Now look, it is going to affect that bush back there, but I can actually fix that. So I'm just paying attention to her dress right now. And I feel like that looks much better. It had a tint of blue, so if you notice as I go this way. But now I can raise the purple, and it will affect that bush back there, and it will affect these ones too, and it looks so pretty. So, and then I can come back here. I can use my radial filter again and bring that over here. And I feel like that's a great start. And then I can go ahead and hit OK. And this is what we have. So let me go ahead and, so this is what we started with, and this is what we got in Camera Raw, and that's what we got with curves. And I just like the skin tones in this one better than trying to manually fix it, because that white balance dropper tool is so amazing to have. So anyways, these are just a couple of photos that I can edit, and I just showed you quickly how to use those tools. Again, Command J to duplicate the layer, filter, Camera Raw, and I'll show you how fast this goes. We'll go ahead and just white balance dropper. Perfect. Raise the exposure a little bit. And the nice thing is you also will have access to presets. So any presets that we sell for our Lightroom sets, you would have access to for ACR.